What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. I've been playing Bard a bit on the PvE and he's turned out to be a really cool support champion, and I think he's really strong too. So here are my first impressions and analysis of our new champion. Let's get started. Let's start by going over his skills. His passive spawns chimes on the map that give him movement speed, mana, and experience when picked up, as well as collecting them increases the power of his passive, which applies an effect to his auto attacks. This passive is actually pretty strong, to be honest. It scales infinitely and gains a significant boost every time you pick up just 5 chimes, adding more damage, a slow, an area of effect ability to it, things like that. Overall, due to the way that it scales and adds so much utility to it, it becomes really strong. And honestly, the fact that it gives a slow is fantastic and makes it really useful. One thing I noticed though was that it was a little bit awkward to leave lane early in the game to collect chimes, but getting the first 5 chimes is really important because after the first 5 it now has a slow effect, so collecting them early is really important. However, outside of lane it's actually amazing because it gives you something to do in the mid-game lull that often occurs on support where you don't really have anything to do other than to ward and shot call, since you can't really farm up since you're support and a fight isn't going to happen for a while. So the fact that it gives you something to do during the mid game is really awesome, and the passive scales really well and really quickly too. It makes his damage pretty strong, to be honest. His Q is a skill shot that pierces through one target only that applies a pretty large slow. If it hits a second target or a wall, all targets hit by the spell are stunned. Overall, this ability is honestly absurd. It does a large amount of damage and the stun is honestly really easy to hit. Like surprisingly easy. Hitting a double stun in lane completely destroys your opponents, no matter the matchup. So it gives them the potential to be a huge lane bully and take massively favorable trades. The stun was honestly just way easier to hit than I expected, which is awesome since it gives him a reliable form of crowd control. His Q to me was the clear ability to max during the games I played, since it does scale up the duration of the stun with it. His W places a health pack that gives health and movement speed to an ally. Over 10 seconds, the pack scales up eventually to heal for a significantly larger amount. This gives Bard quite a bit of sustain, which is pretty nice, but I found myself using this ability for the movement speed much more often than for the heal, since the movement speed is honestly pretty decent and helps you avoid more damage than you would get healed for most of the time. I didn't really spend that much time casting this to scale up for the big health pack massive heal, but in lane it does give you some pretty solid sustain, since you can place it a little bit further back and then just wait for it to get big. Overall, a pretty nice ability. His E turned out to be a lot cooler than I thought, due to the fact that it has unlimited range. It only lets you tunnel through walls, but there are some pretty crazy walls on the map that you can go through with this ability, to the point where it was actually really amazing. With a little bit of creativity, it was possible to pull off some really sick engages by jumping in from a massive distance away due to using it on a huge wall. It was really fun, and I think this ability is awesome. You can also juke out some opponents by placing the tunnel and then just not going through it too sometimes. It's really fun to use. Lastly, his ultimate. Honestly, at first, I didn't know how useful his ultimate would be since it has the potential to be really troll, but after playing around with it in a handful of games, I think his ultimate might be one of the strongest support ultimates in existence, and it makes Bard a contender for the #1 pick potential support. And the reason for this is due to the massive range of 2500 that the ultimate has. Seriously, the range on this is just so freaking huge that the amount of picks you can pull off with this thing is just insane. To put it into perspective, Nocturne's ultimate has 2000 range at rank 1 and 2750 range at rank 2, so this ultimate has almost as much range as a rank 2 Nocturne ultimate. It was a little bit hard to hit though, but I think that was more attributed to me sucking rather than the skill actually being difficult to hit. But it is absolutely amazing for catching out opponents and creating picks, and it's going to make Bard a great solo queue champion since you can pick out opponents so easily. One thing to note, however, is that it didn't really scale up with extra points into it, so I found that waiting until both the Q and the W are maxed to put an extra point into your ultimate to actually be probably the viable way to go, since putting an extra point into the ultimate only lowers the cooldown by a small amount, so the extra points into his heal, which I maxed second, proved to be pretty nice. For his laning phase, I'm not completely sure, but it seemed to be fairly strong. It's very important that you pick up 5 chimes early to get the slow, just so you have that extra crowd control, but once you do, his lane is definitely above average due to his stun. He's kind of comparable to a Lulu, but with a stun and a little bit less damage in lane. So against melee champions, his poke is ridiculous, and against utility supports, the stun is strong enough to all in. So honestly, I think his laning phase is really diverse. You can play a poke disengage lane with his crowd control, or he can play a fight all in lane with his crowd control, which makes his laning pretty powerful since you have so many options. Although I think it's unlikely, it's honestly possible for him to have no bad matchups in lane once we see him on a little bit more competitive level. He'll do great with lane bully AD carries, but expect him to be poor with a little bit weaker in lane AD hyper carries. Weak laning AD carries, since he needs a high damage partner to be successful. However, at any point in lane, if you ever hit a double stun, it's going to give you an absolutely huge trade that can snowball the lane completely if it happens early. So his power is definitely there. And outside of lane, I thought that he was honestly one of the strongest support champions in existence. His pick potential and initiation opportunities with his ultimate and E are a lot better than you would think, and so his playmaking potential is fantastic, one of the best for the supports. Initiating through a really long wall proved to be fairly easy to do, and getting picks with his ultimate is pretty easy as well since nobody really respects the range on it. It's just too big. His kiting is pretty strong because you can give a movement speed buff to your allies, slow the opponents multiple times with your passive, and then land a pretty easy double stun in teamfights. The double stuns were honestly super easy to land in teamfights, so it made for some pretty solid crowd control, and his damage is actually surprisingly relevant since his passive scales up so heavily by the time you are teamfighting that his auto attacks become pretty useful. Overall, I think Bard is a really strong champion, and borderline overpowered to some extent. I definitely expect him to be top tier upon release, to be completely honest. He does everything a support needs to do, has fantastic utility, and insane pick potential. He's pretty easy to play too after a little practice hitting his ultimates, which makes him a great solo queue champion. So if you're a support player, I definitely recommend you check him out, as he's pretty fun too. Anyways, that just about wraps it up. My name is Jeremy, and that's it for my video on Bard. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button so I can tell, and be sure to check me out over on all the socials, of which you can see on your screen. And if you really enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe for some more awesome content in the future, or check out some of my other videos on your screen as well. And above all else, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.